In the summer of 1940, Oberleutnant Werner Hauser was 23 years old and winning the war. Not Germany's war, his war. The specific personal contest between a man and the ocean and the ships that crossed it. He had grown up in Bremen, the son of a harbor pilot who spent his working life guiding vessels through the Weser estuary and who had taken Werner on those voyages from the time the boy could hold a rail. When the Kriegsmarine recruiting office opened in Bremen in 1937, Hauser was 17 years old, and the decision required approximately 30 seconds. He had completed his training in 1939, basic naval instruction, then 6 months learning everything about the Type 7 submarine, technical specifications, mechanical systems, the sounds the hull made at different depths, the relationship between battery charge and time submerged, the emergency escape exercises in the diving tower, the training patrols in the Baltic. In June 1940, his boat slipped out of Wilhelmshaven and headed west. The North Atlantic in summer 1940 was what German U-boat crews would later call die glückliche Zeit, the happy time. The British convoy system had not yet adapted to the new reality of U-boats operating from French Atlantic ports, which had fallen to German forces in June. The convoy escorts were too few, too thinly spread, equipped with detection systems that worked imperfectly at best. The U-boats found the merchant ships in the darkness. The standard tactic was to attack on the surface at night. Surfaced, the U-boat was nearly invisible, too low in the water, too small for the radar systems just beginning to appear on escort vessels. The diesel engines gave it enough speed to maneuver into position, find the gap in the convoy's defenses, fire and dive before the escorts could respond. In Hauser's first patrol from Lorient, he watched his commander fire 3 torpedoes at a British freighter and saw 2 find their mark. The ship, 12,000 tons, grain from Canada, went down in 19 minutes. The crew cheered in the control room. Hauser cheered with them. He would think about those cheers later. Not with guilt, exactly. The men on the freighter were the enemy's supply line, and Dönitz had been precise about the strategic logic. Sink enough tonnage, and Britain could not sustain the war. The arithmetic was straightforward. What he would think about was the 19 minutes. A 12,000-ton ship going down in 19 minutes in the North Atlantic in September. The water temperature. The time a man could survive in that water. The distance from shore. He did not write about this in letters home. He wrote about the weather and the food and the camaraderie of the crew. 47 men in an iron tube, sharing a space that a civilian would have considered inadequate for 10. He wrote about the cook, a Bavarian named Schreiber, who produced hot meals under conditions that should have made cooking impossible. He did not write about the 19 minutes. From June until October 1940, over 270 Allied ships were sunk. U-boat commanders were heroes in Germany, their names in the newspapers, their tonnage counts celebrated like sporting records. Hauser came home from his first patrol to a dock full of people who wanted to hear about it. He told them about Schreiber's cooking. On the other side of the Atlantic, a former mathematics teacher named James Holloway was learning how to kill submarines. Holloway had taught at a grammar school in Manchester before the war. He had enlisted in the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve in September 1939 and been assigned to anti-submarine training because someone had noticed his mathematics scores. Holloway understood that finding a submarine was fundamentally a problem of geometry and probability, of knowing where something was likely to be given the information available and deploying the available tools to confirm or deny that probability. In late 1940, the tools were inadequate and the submarines were winning. Holloway was learning to change that. The inside of a Type 7 U-boat was 67 meters long and 6 meters wide at its broadest point. 44 to 52 men lived in this space for weeks at a time, sometimes months. There was no room for privacy. The forward torpedo room doubled as the crew's sleeping quarters. Hammocks were strung between the torpedo casings. Men slept in shifts, sharing bunks in a rotation called hot bunking, the mattress still warm from the man who had just vacated it. The smell was its own category of experience. Diesel fuel permeated everything: clothing, skin, food. The bilges collected whatever the sea pushed in. Ventilation was minimal when submerged and only marginally better on the surface. A U-boat returning from patrol was identifiable by smell at considerable distance. Hauser, by his second patrol in early 1941, had stopped noticing the smell. This was not an achievement. It was simply what happened when a human being was exposed to a condition long enough. What he had not stopped noticing was the noise. The Type 7 was not quiet. The diesel engines, when running on the surface, produced a continuous vibration that worked its way through every surface of the boat. The pumps, the fans, the machinery of 40-odd men living their lives in a sealed tube. The boat was never silent. And in combat, when the depth charges fell, the noise was something different entirely. A depth charge exploding within lethal range produced a physical event, a blow to the entire vessel, the lights going out, the specific feeling of metal under stress. Hauser experienced his first depth charge attack in March 1941, 200 meters down, while an escort destroyer worked back and forth above them for 6 hours. He wrote to his mother afterward that it had been exciting. He was trying to protect her. It had not been exciting. It had been the specific kind of fear that leaves a mark, the kind that a man carries afterward in the sharpness of his attention to certain sounds, in the quality of his sleep, in the way he looks at the sky when he first climbs out of the hatch after a long submerged run. Holloway, reading intelligence reports and survivor accounts in the winter of 1940 to 41, was building a picture of what he was trying to find and kill. He understood the tactical logic of the night surface attack. He understood the detection problem, that ASDIC sonar could find submerged submarines but not determine depth, and could not find submarines on the surface in darkness. He understood the geometry of convoy defense, the calculation of how many escorts were required to cover how many merchant ships in a formation of what size. In 1940, German U-boats had sunk more tonnage than British yards could replace. If the rate continued, Britain could not import enough food, fuel, and raw material to sustain the war. Churchill had written, privately, that the U-boat threat was the only thing in the war that truly frightened him. Holloway had read similar assessments. He was not frightened. He was focused. The problem was mathematical. Mathematical problems had solutions. He was going to find the solution. The difference between Hauser and Holloway was not courage. Both men had it. The difference was what they were trying to do. Hauser was trying to sink ships. Holloway was trying to change the mathematics. In 1940, Hauser was winning. The happy time was real. The tonnage counts were climbing. The British were losing ships faster than they could build them. But the happy time had a clock running against it. Every patrol Hauser completed, every ship sent down, was also a data point. The British were collecting data. The scientists and mathematicians assigned to the anti-submarine problem were studying each engagement, each failure, each weapon that had not worked, and building a different kind of weapon. Not torpedoes, not guns, understanding. By 1943, Hauser would feel it. In the darkness at 200 meters, in depth charges that found him with a precision the 1940 charges had never had. Holloway had been a patient man with a mathematics problem. In 1943, the mathematics was ready. Dönitz had a theory about the Atlantic. The theory was called Rudeltaktik, pack tactics, and it was elegant in the way that good military doctrine is elegant. Simple in concept, devastating in execution, requiring no technology that Germany did not already possess. The principle was this: a single U-boat patrolling alone could find convoys through luck and skill, and occasionally not at all. The Atlantic was enormous. A convoy was a finite collection of ships on an ocean that swallowed finite collections of ships without difficulty. Finding the convoy was harder than sinking it. The Wolfpack solved the finding problem. Multiple U-boats spread in a line across the convoy's likely route, a patrol line covering hundreds of miles of ocean. When one boat found the convoy, it did not attack. It reported. It shadowed. Headquarters relayed the position to every other boat within range. The pack converged. Then, at night, when the escort's ASDIC was useless against submarines on the surface, the pack attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. The escorts could not be everywhere at once. A convoy attacked from 3 directions at the same time had gaps. Through the gaps, the torpedoes found the ships. In 1941, Hauser experienced his first Wolfpack operation in the North Atlantic. He was a watch officer now on his second boat. 14 U-boats had been vectored onto a convoy of 32 merchant ships. The escort was 7 vessels, adequate for a single attacker, insufficient for 14. Over 2 nights, the pack sank 11 ships. Hauser fired 2 torpedoes that night. He knew from the sounds through the hull that both had found their marks. The boat dove and ran. Depth charges fell, closer than the March attack, close enough that 2 light fixtures shattered, and a valve developed a slow leak that the engineer fixed under pressure in the dark. He was 24 years old. He had been to sea 4 times. He had sunk or assisted in the sinking of something over 30,000 tons of Allied shipping. He wrote to his father about the operation. The letter was censored and the details did not survive, but the fragment that passed the censor spoke of working in coordination with others, in terms that suggested the son's professional pride. Holloway, in the winter of 1941-42, was HMS Verbina's first lieutenant, assigned to convoy escort duty on the Gibraltar run. The Verbina was a Flower-class corvette, small, slow, and desperately uncomfortable in the North Atlantic swells. He was learning that the mathematics was more complex than he had initially understood. ESTIC could find submerged submarines within a specific range. It could determine bearing and distance. It could not determine depth. The depth charge had to be set to explode at the depth where the submarine was believed to be, a guess. An experienced U-boat commander could frustrate this by varying depth unpredictably, by turning at the moment of the attack run, by using the period when the escort was directly overhead and the sonar lost contact, to put distance between himself and the falling charges. The Germans had a name for this period. They called it the dead time, the 15 to 30 seconds when the escort was directly overhead and the charges were in the water and the submarine could not yet be detected again. An experienced commander used every second of it. Holloway mapped this on paper. He drew the geometry of the attack, the escort's approach track, the moment of contact loss, the likely positions of the submarine during the dead time, the pattern of charges required to cover the probability distribution. He brought the map to his commander, who looked at it for a long time. "Where did you learn to think like this?" the commander asked. "I taught mathematics," Holloway said. The commander submitted the analysis to Western Approaches Command. It became part of the anti-submarine training program that would eventually be taught to every escort commander in the Atlantic. Hauser, at sea that winter, did not know that a mathematics teacher in a Flower-class corvette was mapping his tactics onto paper and distributing the map to everyone who was trying to kill him. He was focused on the ships. He had not yet learned to be afraid of the mathematics. In January 1942, the Atlantic changed. Germany declared war on the United States in December 1941, 4 days after Pearl Harbor. Dönitz responded with Operation Drumbeat, Paukenschlag, sending 5 long-range Type 9 U-boats to the American East Coast. The Americans were not ready. The American East Coast in early 1942 was lit. The cities had not dimmed their lights, and merchant ships moving along the coast were silhouetted against the illumination at night, visible to submarine periscopes at ranges that made targeting trivial. The Americans had no convoy system. Ships moved independently. German U-boat commanders called it the second happy time. Some called it the American shooting season. Between January and August 1942, U-boats sank nearly 400 ships along the American coast and in the Caribbean. Oil tankers burned off the beaches of Florida and New Jersey. Merchant sailors died in sight of shore. Civilians on the beach watched ships go down. Hauser was not part of Drumbeat. His Type 7 lacked the range, but the reports came back to Lorient with a quality he recognized from 1940. Men who had found a target-rich environment. He was being given his own command. In March 1942, Hauser took command of U-447, a new Type 7 fresh from the Blohm and Voss yards in Hamburg. He was 25 years old. He had spent 3 years working his way from junior watch officer to the specific authority of a command of his own. The boat was his. The crew, 44 men, many of them young, the experienced petty officers already thinning as losses accumulated, was his. He took U-447 on its first patrol in April 1942. North Atlantic, convoy routes. The Wolfpack operations were still working, though the British escort groups were improving. The dead time problem that Holloway had mapped was starting to produce results. Depth charge patterns were more accurate, attack runs were more coordinated. But the fundamental advantage of the night surface attack was still intact. Hauser sank 3 ships on his first command patrol. He came home to Lorient to find that the concrete submarine pens were completed, that the base was the operational center of the most successful naval campaign in a generation. He also came home to find a letter from his father that contained a sentence he did not know how to answer. I heard that 43 boats did not return last month. Are you being careful? The number was approximately correct. The losses were climbing. But the number that mattered to Hauser was not the fleet number. It was his crew. 44 men. Their names, their habits, the specific quality of each man at his station in the dark. Schreiber, who had transferred with him from his previous boat, was still making hot meals in conditions that should have made cooking impossible. Hauser had watched crews age in 2 years of North Atlantic War. The men who had been teenagers at the start of the campaign were now veterans, careful, experienced, alert to the specific sounds that meant danger. But there were fewer of them. The boats that did not come back took their experienced men with them, and the replacements arrived younger and greener, trained well but untested. This was the mathematics that Dönitz did not discuss in his public communications. The tonnage war was being won, but the experienced crews were being used up faster than they could be replaced. He wrote back that yes, he was being careful. He did not mention that careful and safe were, in the North Atlantic in 1942, 2 different things. Holloway had been given his own command in February 1942. HMS Stonecrop, another Flower-class corvette, assigned to the North Atlantic escort groups. He was fighting with better tools now. The new 10-centimeter radar could detect surfaced U-boats at ranges the older radar could not achieve. High-frequency direction finding, HF/DF, called Huff-Duff by the men who used it, could triangulate a U-boat's position from its radio transmissions. The Hedgehog, a forward-throwing weapon that fired a pattern of 24 small charges ahead of the escort, eliminated the dead time problem entirely. The mathematics was catching up. Not yet to the point where Hauser needed to be afraid, but closer. The winter of 1942 to 43 was when Hauser began to understand what the mathematics felt like from the inside. He had completed 4 patrols as commander of U-447. He had sunk 11 ships. He had come home each time, the essential fact, the only fact that ultimately mattered, and which was becoming less certain with each patrol. The escorts were different. Not dramatically, not in any single engagement that announced itself as a turning point. The change was cumulative, and it was in the quality of the attacks. In 1941, depth charges fell with the imprecision of men guessing, close enough to be frightening, rarely close enough to be lethal. In late 1942, the charges were falling with a precision that suggested the escorts knew, with more certainty than before, exactly where U-447 was. Hauser did not know about the 10-centimeter radar. He did not know about high-frequency direction finding. He did not know that every radio transmission his boat sent, the contact reports, the situation updates, the signals to headquarters that Dönitz required and that Wolfpack tactics depended on, was being picked up by direction-finding equipment on the escort ships, triangulated against other intercepts, and translated into a position accurate enough to guide an attack run. What he knew was that the attacks were better, that his boat was slower to surface and more cautious about transmitting, that the margin between an attack run and a depth charge attack had narrowed in ways the pre-patrol briefings had not fully described. March 1943 was the peak of the tonnage war. U-boats sank 567,000 tons of Allied shipping, the highest monthly total of the campaign. The Wolfpacks were at their maximum strength. Dönitz had more than 400 boats in commission and over 100 at sea at any given time. Hauser was one of them, running with a Wolfpack against convoy HX-229 in mid-March, the largest convoy battle of the war, 40 ships and 20 U-boats over 3 days. U-447 fired 6 torpedoes and 3 found their marks. He came home to Lorient to the specific mixture of recognition and dread that had become the texture of returning from patrol. His engineer, Braun, told him something after the March patrol that Hauser had been thinking about ever since. The escorts are working together now, not just the ship that found us, all of them. Hauser had noticed the same thing. The escorts used to be occupied with the immediate threat. Now they were coordinating, one escort pursuing the attacker while others swept the flanks, an aircraft appearing from somewhere with a searchlight and depth charges. A practiced, coordinated response. A doctrine. Holloway's maps had become doctrine. Hauser did not know this, did not know the name of the man whose analysis had been distributed to every escort commander in the Atlantic. He knew the Atlantic was becoming less forgiving. The experienced captains who had survived the happy time were going down. The names in the briefings, the boats that did not return, the gaps in the wolf pack filled by commanders whose inexperience showed. He wrote to his father in late March, "Spring is coming, the weather will improve. I think the summer will be difficult." He was right about the summer. He was wrong about the timeline. The difficult month was May. Holloway, in the spring of 1943, was fighting the same convoys from the other side. HMS Stonecrop had been part of two major convoy battles in March, including the battle for HX-229, where U-447 had fired its 6 torpedoes. The convoy had lost ships. The escort had failed to sink the attackers it had pursued. But Holloway had noticed something. The attacks were taking longer. The wolf packs were spending more time closing on the convoy, more time waiting for the moment to attack. The U-boats were cautious in a way they had not been in 1942. They were afraid of something. They were afraid of the radar they did not know existed. They were afraid of the huff-duff that picked up their radio transmissions. They were afraid of the hedgehog that had eliminated the dead time. They were not yet afraid enough to stop coming, but the mathematics was about to change. May 1943 began with convoy ONS-5, 43 merchant ships, 16 escort vessels, 30 U-boats vectored onto the convoy in the North Atlantic, the largest wolfpack attack of the war. Over 6 days in storm conditions, 13 merchant ships were sunk. 6 U-boats were destroyed by escorts and aircraft operating at the outer edge of their range. In the mathematics of the happy time, 13 ships for 6 U-boats was a German victory. But the mathematics had changed. The 6 U-boats destroyed represented experienced crews who could not be replaced. The 13 merchant ships represented cargo that could be. American shipyards were producing vessels faster than U-boats could sink them. Liberty ships launched in weeks. Experienced U-boat commanders could not be produced in weeks. The ratio that mattered was not tonnage per U-boat. It was experienced crews remaining. Holloway was on a training assignment at Western Approaches Command in Liverpool, the war games on the linoleum floor where escort commanders practiced convoy defense against simulated wolfpack attacks. The exercises had been run by women, Janet O'Kell and Jean Laidlaw, who had beaten Admiral Horton 5 times in a row in November 1942, playing the escort role against his submarines. Holloway had studied their transcripts, played the wolfpack side, tried to find the gaps. He had found fewer gaps each month. By May 1943, the escort doctrine was close to what the mathematics required. The 2 weeks after ONS-5 proved it. The next 3 convoys attacked by wolfpacks lost 7 merchant ships. The wolfpacks lost 7 U-boats. Even exchange in ships. Catastrophic exchange in experienced crews. Then convoy SC-130. 37 ships from Halifax to Liverpool. 8 escorts, several equipped with huff-duff and the new 10-centimeter radar. 25 U-boats assembled by Dönitz in 3 wolfpacks specifically to attack it. The escorts found the wolfpacks before the wolfpacks found the convoy. The huff-duff picked up U-boat radio transmissions. The radar found them on the surface. The escorts drove them down before they could reach attack position. When they submerged, aircraft found them with airborne radar. When aircraft attacked, they dove. When they dove, the surface escorts were waiting. The convoy made Liverpool without losing a ship. 5 U-boats did not return from the SC-130 battle. One of them was U-954. Among its crew was Peter Dönitz, the admiral's son. Dönitz received the news and ordered the withdrawal from the North Atlantic. "We had lost the Battle of the Atlantic," he wrote. Hauser received the withdrawal order in the middle of his 6th Command Patrol, shadowing a convoy when the signal came: break off and return to base. He surfaced after the acknowledgement signal and stood in the hatch looking at the Atlantic. He had been at sea for 3 years. He had crossed this ocean enough times that he knew its moods, the light in different seasons, the way the swells ran in weather from the west, the particular dark on a night with no moon. He went below and told Braun to set course for Lorient. He did not know that Holloway was alive, that the mathematics teacher from Manchester had spent 3 years learning how to kill U-boats and had helped build the doctrine that had just ended the Wolfpack campaign. He knew that the Atlantic, which had been his ocean for 3 years, had stopped being his. The mathematics had changed. He had felt it coming. In Liverpool, Holloway received the SC-130 intelligence reports: 5 U-boats for 0 merchant ships. The exchange ratio the Admiralty had been working toward since 1940 had been achieved and exceeded. He thought about the 5 boats: 40 to 50 men per boat, 200 men who had gone down in the Atlantic while he had been building the mathematics that found them. He did not know Hauser's name. He did not know that one of the Wolfpack boats had received the withdrawal order and turned for Lorient with a commander standing in the hatch, looking at the ocean. But he understood, in the way that men who have been in a long contest understand when it ends, that something had finished. The U-boats would come back. The campaign would continue for 2 more years, but the mathematics had shifted. And mathematics, once it shifts, does not shift back. The U-boats came back in the autumn of 1943. Dönitz had promised they would. He had withdrawn them in May to refit and re-equip. New radar detectors, improved torpedoes, better anti-aircraft armament for the fights on the surface that the increased Allied air cover was forcing. He had told his commanders that the withdrawal was temporary. He had believed it. The boats that returned to the North Atlantic in September 1943 found a different ocean. Not because the weather had changed, not because the convoy routes were different or the merchant ships were fewer. The ocean was the same ocean. The mathematics had changed. The 10-centimeter radar that the escorts were now carrying could detect a surfaced U-boat in darkness at distances that made the night surface attack, the tactic that had defined the happy time, functionally impossible. The U-boat that surfaced to attack was found before it could reach position. The U-boat that stayed submerged to avoid the radar lost the speed advantage that made the Wolfpack tactic work. Submerged on electric motors, a Type 7 could make 7 knots. The convoy it was pursuing made 10. The Wolfpack tactic required radio transmissions. Radio transmissions were found by Huff Duff. Found by Huff Duff meant attacked before reaching the convoy. Hauser had returned to Lorient in June, filed his patrol report, and waited for the refit. He had been given 3 weeks of leave and gone home to Bremen to see his family and walk along the Weser and try to remember what it felt like to be on land. He could not sleep in a bed. The stillness was wrong. His body had adapted to the motion of the boat, and the absence of it was disorienting in a way he had not expected. He went back to Lorient early. When U-447 finally put to sea in September, Hauser briefed his crew on the new equipment with the care of a man who understood that the briefing was about survival. The new radar detector, the Naxos, could pick up the 10-centimeter emissions from the Allied radar. It gave warning. Not certainty, not safety, but the additional seconds that could mean the difference between diving before the radar found you and diving after. Use it, Hauser told them. Every watch, every surface transit. If Naxos activates, we go down immediately, no questions. Braun nodded. The first autumn patrol lasted 23 days. U-447 found no convoy. The radio intelligence that Dönitz's headquarters used to vector Wolfpacks onto targets was less reliable now. The Allies had changed their codes in the summer, and the B-Dienst Signals Intelligence Service had lost the ability to decrypt convoy routing signals in time to be useful. The U-boats were navigating partly blind. Hauser surfaced at night to charge batteries and check position. The Naxos activated twice in the first week. Both times he dove immediately. Both times he heard aircraft engines after the dive, a patrol bomber searching the area where his radar emissions had been detected. The ocean was watching him in ways it had not watched him in 1940. He came home from the September patrol without having fired a torpedo. The second autumn patrol was worse. A wolf pack of 11 boats was assembled against a convoy that intelligence suggested was taking the northern route. The intelligence was wrong. The convoy had been rerouted on the basis of decrypted German signals. Ultra-intelligence steering convoys away from Wolfpack patrol lines. The Wolfpack spent 9 days in the northern Atlantic looking for a convoy that was not there. 2 boats were lost to aircraft during the search, not in combat. On the surface, charging batteries, detected by airborne radar, attacked before they could dive. Hauser wrote in his log that evening a sentence that was not standard patrol notation. "We are hunting. But something is also hunting us, and it is better at this than we are." Holloway was given command of HMS Nene in October 1943, a new frigate, better armed and faster than the Flower-class corvettes he had served on since 1941. The difference was audible in the first patrol. The speed with which his crew responded to a Huff-Duff contact, the coordination of the sweep pattern, the specific calm of men executing a practiced procedure rather than improvising under pressure. These were not the qualities of a crew that had been taught the mathematics. They were the qualities of a crew for whom the mathematics had become instinct. Holloway's first contact as captain of HMS Nene came on November 7, 1943. The Huff-Duff operator picked up a U-boat transmission bearing northwest. Holloway altered course, increased speed. The radar found the contact 12 minutes later, a surfaced U-boat, 3 miles, caught in the act of transmitting its position report to Dönitz's headquarters. The U-boat dove. Holloway had been here before, on the linoleum floor in Liverpool. He knew the geometry. He knew where the U-boat was most likely to be after the dive, which direction it would turn, how deep it would go. He knew the pattern of charges required to cover the probability distribution. He gave the orders. The Aztec operator found the contact. The Hedgehog fired its pattern of 24 charges ahead of the frigate. No dead time, no period when the sonar lost contact and the submarine could maneuver. The charges fell. 2 minutes later, oil and debris surfaced. Holloway logged the kill with the precision that training required. He did not celebrate. He felt the specific satisfaction of a mechanism that had worked correctly, a calculation made and confirmed, a problem solved. He had been trying to solve it for 3 years. Hauser's 8th Patrol in December 1943 was his last. Not because U-447 was sunk, but the patrol that lasted 31 days without making contact with a single convoy, during which the Naxos activated 14 times, and the boat dove 14 times, and the crew spent 14 separate intervals in the dark at 200 meters, listening to aircraft searching above them. That patrol changed something in Hauser that was not technical. He was 26 years old. He had been at sea for 4 years. He had sunk 17 ships, commanded 11 patrols, brought every man home. He came back from the December patrol and filed his report and requested a shore posting. Braun found him that evening on the dock. "The Admiral approved it?" Braun asked. "Yes," Hauser said. Braun was quiet for a while. "I'm not sure I could go back either," he said. Hauser did not answer. He was looking at the water. He had spent 4 years on that ocean. He had learned it the way a man learns something that is trying to kill him, with the complete attention of someone for whom inattention is fatal. He had been a hunter. He had become, in a way he had not fully processed until the December patrol, the hunted. The ocean had not changed. The mathematics had. He reported to the training facility at Neustadt in January 1944. He would spend the rest of the war teaching young men what the Atlantic was like. He did not tell them it was like the happy time. He told them what it was actually like. The Battle of the Atlantic did not end in May 1943. It ended in May 1945, when the last U-boat still at sea received the surrender order and surfaced with black flags to meet the Allied ships that were waiting for them. The campaign ran for 67 months, from the first day of the war to the last, making it the longest continuous military campaign of the Second World War. In those 67 months, Germany built 1,162 U-boats. 739 were sunk. 30,000 German submariners died, a loss rate of 75%. The Allies lost 3,500 merchant ships. 36,000 merchant sailors died. These are the numbers. They do not capture what it was like to be Hauser in the control room at 200 meters, or Holloway on the bridge in a North Atlantic storm at 3 in the morning. But they do capture one thing precisely: who won? The Allied merchant fleet delivered the food and fuel and soldiers that sustained Britain and equipped the armies that invaded North Africa and Sicily and France. Without the Atlantic supply line, none of those campaigns were possible. The U-boats did not cut the Atlantic supply line. They tried for 67 months, with the best submarine force in the world, with courage that the casualty statistics make undeniable. They failed. Not because German submariners were inadequate. Hauser was typical of a force that accepted a 75% casualty rate and kept going back. They failed because the mathematics changed. Holloway survived the war. He commanded HMS Nene through the final phases of the Atlantic campaign, sinking 2 more U-boats before the surrender. He was demobilized in September 1945 and returned to Manchester. He went back to teaching mathematics. He found a position at a secondary modern school in Salford, teaching the same quadratic equations and logarithms as before. He was a better teacher after the war. Not because the war had given him inspiring stories. He rarely talked about the war in class. Because the war had confirmed what he had always believed, that the correct application of mathematical reasoning to a real problem produces results that nothing else can produce. He taught until 1978. His students remembered him as a patient man who believed, with a conviction that occasionally seemed excessive for the subject, that precision mattered. He died in 1983 in Manchester, at the age of 71. His obituary in the local paper described him as a dedicated teacher of 30 years. It did not mention the Atlantic. He had not told anyone outside of the Navy what he had spent the war doing. Hauser survived the war at Neustadt. He had trained submarine crews from January 1944 until the surrender. He had sent men to sea who did not come back, a different kind of weight, and he carried it carefully. He returned to Bremen in 1945. He went back to the water, not as a sailor, but as a harbor master's assistant, then harbor master, managing the slow revival of Bremen's waterfront as Germany rebuilt. He married in 1947. He had 2 sons. He took them on the Weser the way his father had taken him. He did not tell them about the war until they were adults. When he did, he told them about the mathematics, about the moment in December 1943 when the Naxos activated for the 14th time, and he stood in the control room listening to the aircraft above them and understood that something had changed. The British found a way to see us, he told his sons, not by being better sailors, by being better mathematicians. I did not understand this until I could feel it in the boat. He paused. It is important to understand what is trying to kill you, and it is important to understand what kind of thing it is. He meant not always a soldier. Sometimes a mathematician drawing the geometry of where a submarine would be after the dive, distributing the drawing to every escort commander in the Atlantic. This is what the Battle of the Atlantic was. Not U-boats against escorts, not German courage against British endurance. A mathematician from Manchester and a sailor from Bremen, each trying to understand the ocean and the mathematics of survival. One changed the mathematics, the other felt the change. Germany sent the best sailors in the world into the Atlantic. This is not a figure of speech. By any objective measure, the quality of their training, the skill of their commanders, the courage of their crews, the sophistication of their tactics, the U-boat arm was among the most formidable fighting forces of the Second World War. The men who served in it accepted conditions and odds that would have broken most military organizations. They went back, patrol after patrol, as the loss rates climbed from acceptable to catastrophic. Hauser was not exceptional. He was what the U-boat arm produced when it was working correctly, a skilled, disciplined, courageous officer who understood his boat and his ocean. He lost, not because he was outfought, because he was outthought. The Allied response to the U-boat campaign was, at its core, an intellectual project. The scientists at the Operational Research Section, the mathematicians at Western Approaches Command, the women running war games on the linoleum floor in Liverpool, the Bletchley Park cryptanalysts who read German signals, the engineers who built the 10-centimeter radar and the Hedgehog. Most of them had never been to sea. They looked at a problem, how do you find and kill something that is actively trying not to be found, and applied the tools of their professions to it. Holloway had done this. He had taken the problem of the dead time and mapped it geometrically, distributed the map, and watched it become doctrine. One mathematics teacher, one night, one piece of paper. This is what won the Battle of the Atlantic. Not the depth charges, though they were necessary. Not the convoys, though they were essential. Not the courage of the merchant sailors, though that courage was real and the losses were catastrophic. The thing that won was the decision to treat the U-boat not as an opponent to be defeated through superior force, but as a problem to be solved through superior understanding. The U-boat arm never made the equivalent decision. Dönitz understood tactics. He understood that radio communication exposed his boats. He never solved the exposure problem because solving it would have required abandoning the Wolfpack tactic, and the Wolfpack tactic was the only thing that had made the campaign work. He was trapped by his own success. The happy time had proved that the Wolfpack worked. When the mathematics changed and the Wolfpack stopped working, the institutional commitment was too deep to abandon. Holloway, in 1940, had not been committed to anything except solving the problem. He had come to it without tactical doctrine, without institutional investment in a specific approach, with nothing except the training of a man who had spent his professional life finding solutions to problems that did not yet have solutions. This gave him the freedom to see the problem clearly. Hauser had the boat, he had the ocean. He had the courage and the skill and the crew. Holloway had the mathematics. In 1940, the boat won. In 1943, the mathematics won. It is still winning. Every generation of naval warfare has produced its version of the Hauser-Holloway contest, the weapon system that seems unbeatable against the intellectual project that finds the specific weakness in it. The submarine against the convoy system, the aircraft carrier against the land-based anti-ship missile, the stealth aircraft against the passive radar. The weapon is always formidable. The mathematics always finds a way. This is what Hauser told his sons on the Weser. This is what Holloway taught without knowing he was teaching it, to 30 years of students who remembered him as a patient man who believed, with excessive conviction, that precision mattered. Precision mattered. It won the longest campaign of the Second World War, one calculation at a time.